Howdy, Joe Straczynski here again, here with a commentary, a sync-up commentary for Point of No Return. This will be a somewhat different kind of a commentary because for all that happens in these 3 episodes, Messages from Earth, Point of No Return, and Severed Dreams, while there's a lot implied in the second episode, a lot that is set up for the future, and some things happen, granted, it's really kind of the second act in a 3-act story. And that second act is what's often referred to by writers as the desert of the middle, because you're trying to figure out how to keep people's interest going. So it starts big with Messages from Earth, dips down here in terms of action, and pops up again for Severed Dreams. So I'll be talking a little bit more about why the episode and some facts behind the episode, rather than necessarily commenting on every single thing that you see. So bear that in mind as we go forward. I may have a treat for you at the end, so do stick around. I think that's about all I need to say to begin this process. So let me dive in, and we'll just go with this. We'll do our usual countdown. 3, 2, 1, play. So, as I mentioned in the last commentary on Messages from Earth, this is my favorite scenes, by the way. This is the notion of politics influencing truth that we're seeing right now, where in Russia and in Ukraine, where the emperor and Tsar Prime, but Vladimir Putin was given a lot of faulty intelligence because people were afraid to say anything otherwise to him. So it's like we're seeing this acted out right now. But back to where we were. So I mentioned last time, I called this episode Point of No Return for a whole lot of reasons. And to dive deep for 1 second into that, it's not just a point of no return for the characters. I had sold, if you will, Babylon 5 to the fan community as something you have never seen before. And for me, the hinge of that promise was this 3-parter that I knew was going to be coming from day 1 of the pilot. Because what I needed to get to was the point of no return as a writer and as a producer. To me, what that means is, in other shows of the time, you wouldn't see Picard joining the Klingons and then staying there. He might join them for, strategic reasons for a day or an episode, or might pretend to join them for some reason, but he wouldn't turn, and the producers wouldn't turn, the show upside down. And I knew that if I could just get to this point, there'd be no going back. Number one, I couldn't just, a lot of television, they'd hit the reset button. And I wanted to show that with this series of episodes, it was impossible to hit the reset button. It could not be done. I was desperate. Let me get a 3rd season. Let me get halfway through the 3rd season. Let me show people what this is all about. And then we can move forward. So it was really just me holding my breath and focusing everything on what I knew was a point of no return story-wise, and became the title of the episode. For a moment, I was considering titling it Point of No Return 1, 2, and 3, but I liked the idea of Severed Dreams. Messages from Earth was kind of a cool title, so I ended up changing them, but this was always the point of no return for me. As a matter of fact, in my office for most of the first 4 years while we were shooting Babylon 5, I had a quote on the wall of my office. There were a couple other quotes from writers, but this one in particular I kept directly over my head. And there's pictures of it in various magazines that have showed up. And it's a quote from Franz Kafka saying, "The point of no return, that's the point that must be reached." And every time I walked into my office in the morning, or my morning, I saw that staring at me, and I was reminded every single day, this is the end game. This is what I'm shooting for. And I still have that sign to this day. The point of no return, point that must, you can't see me now, but you're better off that way. That must be reached. And I think that as a storyteller, For any good writer, you really have to get to that point. And once we reached it, I knew that this was the episode or series of episodes that would tell the fans that we were genuinely, sincerely serious about a big novel-like story, which, the 5 parts of a novel are introduction, rising action, complication, climax, and denouement. And this is the complication part, where suddenly nothing is the same anymore. So that, for me, was what I really wanted to establish, and that is why this episode is titled the way that it is. We saw a moment ago the martial law that was being declared, and we saw troops firing on troops, and it's funny how this show becomes more relevant with time every year, and we're seeing things happening in Eastern Europe that feel a little bit similar to what some of was in this show. I rather that it weren't relevant. I rather this was just a science fiction show, but there are parts where I go, yeah, some things don't change. To the question of Lady Morella, who's Majel Barrett Roddenberry, how this came about. I was at the Blackpool Convention in England, the UK, which was in many ways horrifically run, and a lot of things happened there that shouldn't have happened, with pirating and that kind of thing. But at various points, I sort of kept running into Majel at the autograph lines and that sort of thing, and we began to chat. And she said, let's have dinner. Sure. So we met for dinner, Catherine, myself, and Majel. And we just sort of chatted, and she was saying how much she believed that it was important to support Babylon 5 because, when Gene started out, there really wasn't a whole lot of support for Star Trek, and it ended up being canceled after just 3 seasons. And she felt there was room enough for... it says Hamilton, room enough for both Hamilton and me. There's room enough for all these shows. And eventually she said, look, how about I do a cameo appearance on the show? It'll be a message for the fans, a way of saying, listen, we are all in this together, and let's stay together and support the other shows. And she wanted to really, put her face and her career behind that statement. So I said, great, I will write a part for you, and we will figure this out. And that became Lady Morella, and that's how she ended up on the show. And when she did the episode, she was treated like royalty by everyone on the crew. And it was really a fun opportunity to sort of bring these two worlds together. Going back to the show itself for the moment, again, we see martial law being declared, and we see our characters reacting to that. This is the point in any story where you start tightening the noose around the characters. And when Sheridan is addressing the command and control area, those were serious moments, and those were certainly, again, we're seeing kind of echoes of that today. Parenthetical, the signs behind them, traitors and all the rest of it. We had a whole division of the art department that was just making propaganda posters, and some people felt that those posters were a little bit over the top. But as we're seeing these days, and some of the rather horrific posters and prints that are coming out of certain political parties, which are infinitely worse, I'm not sure we were that far out of the line. So what we're really seeing here is not only tightening the noose, but also the sense of everyone get out of Dodge now if you possibly can. It was hard keeping G'Kar sort of under wraps for several episodes, but I really wanted to touch upon the notion that very often great political leaders are those who were in prison for a while. It's so funny. Lando's always scheming, and I can't recall very many of his schemes that went well. It was always he wanted the techno. The funny thing is, there's an insecurity to Lando. For all of his bluster and his pomp, he's always looking for validation that he is someone of potential or real importance. He wanted the techno mages to, sign off on him. He tried sticking close to the emperor because it might do him some good, and now he wants, Lady Morella to sort of sanction him as somebody important, as someone worthy of advancement. That very often happens, I think, to those who are, or who project themselves as being the most confident, are in many ways the most insecure. Whereas we have Veer, who is patently insecure about everything and very open about it, but in a way that gives him a certain kind of strange courage. For me, Veer is the character referred to often in literature as God's fool. He is someone who can wander innocently through the minefield and not blow up. He's really not trying to figure out where he's going. He just goes. And things work out for him. And Lando's always trying to figure out where he wants to go, and nothing ever works out for him. There was a great blooper from this scene where they kept messing up the last couple of lines. And as they go off camera, Peter smiles a little more than he probably intended to, because he was sure that this next time he was going to mess it up. This is the interesting part of, and the fun part of doing a show set with a military chain of command, is that you really get to illustrate how that works. It's not a bunch of, very often when there's military science fiction books or movies, they're just off there, a bunch of Marines doing their thing, and there's no one pulling their chain, back on Earth. And here we begin to raise the question of what is moral behavior? What is a moral order? At what point does the government lose moral authority? At what point do you disobey an immoral order? That's one of the hardest questions for anyone in the military to respond to, because when you're given an order, you have only a few seconds in many cases to decide to obey it or not, and lives could depend on it. If you choose wrong, if you think the order is wrong morally, and you're wrong, or worse still, you're right, the officer giving you that order knows already that it's an immoral order, and you could potentially be putting yourself in great jeopardy as a consequence of that. And here, when the general references, respect the chain of command, we understand that he's trying to say something of importance to Sheridan, but he can't say it on an open channel in an open way. So all I can do is hope that this works out. The Night Watch, again, I kind of got a lot of emails when this show first aired that saying it's over the top and people wouldn't be turning on each other in this fashion. But we now have the Night Watch in Florida and other states where they were asked to turn in people who were seeking care that the governors or those in charge objected to. There are now, there were tip lines to turn in people. We can be easily turned against each other, more easily than I would hope, if the moment is right and the emotion is right. And this episode is this whole Night Watch arc is a warning against that. I've always loved the character of Marshall T plays here with Talon. He just has this real soldier-like perspective on things. And in fact, he's been sitting here for 6 days, or standing here for 6 days, going on 7. Says a lot about him. Marshall was great to work with. He was this big, muscular guy. Still is, as far as I know. But the sensitivity you would not necessarily equate with a guy who was that really massive and built. Funny, charming, really bright, a dedicated actor. Everyone loved working with him, which is why he brought him back, so many times. And we have, again, a situation here where some won't put on that piece of cloth, which tells us, and tells Zach, of course, too, who will and will not turn against them later on. It's kind of a trope in this kind of storytelling that when one of our heroes goes to talk to his former companions or co-workers or fellow officers, that they will listen, or at least some of them will. And I wanted to show that, again, we are past the point of no return. When he goes down there to talk to the guys, it's really kind of too late. So that we go against the trope of that kind of storytelling. Use of mirror is always very difficult in a show if you're not doing like burn-ins from green screens, because the camera can very easily be seen. There are a number of shots in the show where we're doing mirror shots where you can just catch a piece of the camera. I'm not going to tell you where they are, but they are there. And what you have to brace or cover the camera with black sheets. Everyone on the crew wears black shirts and black caps, if at all possible, and black pants, so that there won't be any glare reflected onto the mirror. They take a long time to set up, but they're really worth it because you get to see them, both talking to each other, but one behind. That's the thing about television, that very often you'll see a character standing here and a character standing over there, and they're having a conversation, but they're both facing this way, not at each other. They're doing that because you, the viewer, or we, the viewers, want to see their faces as they're having the conversation. But if you sit down and think about the actual structure of the shot, they aren't looking at each other, they're looking past each other. Or one's looking past the other, the other one's looking toward the window or the wall. But mirror shots allow you to put them both looking at each other in the same shot, but directed toward the camera, which helps it to be more immediate and it pulls you into the scene more. And there comes the theme of the entire show, that there is always choice. That when someone says there is no choice, that they're just trying to comfort themselves with a choice that they've already made. That's how I've lived my life. I came from a family where everyone who was in this cycle of violence and drunkenness and abuse said, in essence, look, I don't have a choice. I am what I was made to be. I am what I experienced. And I never, ever, ever bought into that piece of bullshit. I think we all have the capacity to change. We all have the ability to choose what we want to do. And those who are in this scene with Zach and Garibaldi have made their choices. And sometimes when you make that choice, you feel like there's no going back. We can point of no return. But there is always a chance to go back. I don't care about the name of the episode in terms of real life. No matter how deep trouble you get into, no matter how hard you may think you have fallen, and you may not have a choice, you do. You can always choose a different way. Jerry did a great job in this, and we parked the camera for most of it and just let him do his thing. when an actor is on, when he's got it, when he's in the moment, don't cut away if you can possibly avoid it. Even though, like for here, we have a weird kind of a pan with him when he walks over, and we cut to Zach for a reaction. Other than that, this is one take. This is Jerry, who was really prepared for the scene. He was looking forward to this scene, and he said, "I'm not quite sure what to do with my hands during this." So the points where he feels like he's acting with his hands more than he probably should be, and doing this and that. And he was never quite sure what, as an actor in general, what to do with his hands, which is why he kept them in his pockets a lot. And here he's, speaking in many ways for the viewer. What does this mean to put this rag on? Who gave you the authority for this? And they're all being very quiet. No one's saying anything because it's easier to be quiet than answer his questions. So when Garibaldi, also doesn't agree to go along with this, that's his point of no return. This, again, second acts are all about spinning up the characters in preparation for the big confrontation. It's really the time when it has to be a character story more than anything else, because you have to feel the hinge turning. You have to feel what's going on. So it's like Messages from Earth and Severed Dreams are the two sides of the clamp. And in the middle of that are the characters and their personalities. They're just being squeezed harder and harder and harder to see what's going to happen, which way they're going to go. I can't recall if I mentioned it before, but we tried to replicate the lighting on Mars and Mars. Listen to me. Replicate the lighting on Narn, similar sound, in his quarters, so that when we're either in Jakar's quarters or on the Narn Homer, we know exactly where we are. This line is one I've used a lot. That all answers are replies, but not all replies are answers. That comes in handy quite a lot, particularly when working with executives. And this sequence goes back to Dust to Dust. And I love that the Book of Jakar has been building slowly. In the first season, we built the chrysalids day by day, piece by piece. And we've been building the Book of Jakar now over the course of the last couple of seasons. So in Dust to Dust, the character says to pretend to be his father, is for most to survive, some must be sacrificed. And he has bought into that with an almost religious fervor. And he's come to the point of any real important leader or spiritual leader to see that rage ultimately is destructive. Rage, it leads you nowhere good. And there has to be something in that person that will bring us toward a peaceful solution, or at least a peace within. And this is where we really kind of start to see the spiritual Jakar being birthed. And as tends to be the case, those around him don't quite get it. In every religious or spiritual book, there's that moment when that person changes and they don't get it. The piece of paper he's handling there and he's handed to Ivanova is based on, we got some classified covers that have been declassified, but that were used by military intelligence, CIA, others, for classified information, privileged information, eyes only. And we were using them in the show. So one day I get a call and the person answering the phone says, it's so-and-so with the Secret Service, he wants to talk to you. Now, of course, I start going through everything I've ever said to anyone about anything. I can't think of anything that would get me in trouble. So I take the call. He says, my name is so-and-so. I'm with the Secret Service. And we are aware that you've been using some of the declassified covers in your show. We've seen them and we recognize them. You changed them, you modified them, but the edging, the borders are recognizable. So you are using the old ones. Let me send you the new ones that you can use. Really? Thank you. And he said, the only thing that I ask in return is some Babylon 5 swag. So he sent us a bunch of the actual current covers, which could be used as long as there wasn't any actual classified information or references on the covers. We could add all the fictional stuff we wanted to. And I sent him a bunch of Babylon 5 swag, t-shirts, cups, pins, everything else. And the one thing he had said in addition to that, in addition to the covers, is anything else that you want. So yeah, I'd love to have like a Secret Service t-shirt. I have a big collection of t-shirts. And in the box with the covers was a green pullover like this with the silhouette of the White House over the left-hand side, and under it was written, the White House. So I called him back and said, listen, I was hoping it would say Secret Service, but it doesn't say Secret Service on it. And he said, well, it wouldn't be very secret if we did put it on there, now would it? And I really couldn't argue with his logic. So I still have that shirt, by the way. As well as having this board, I still have that shirt that he want me to. I'll show you in the next episode. The monitor that gets destroyed, he never appears in any other episodes, happens to be there, but we needed something to get destroyed. I kind of feel like I committed a cliche here because there's so often we will see fights break out with marginal grounds for those fights. And like the old Western movies, where saloons burst into fights. So we kind of a little bit went far with that, maybe more than we should have, but it was fun. And there are several people in the art department of this show who appear in this episode. In the elevator, the guy who was told to go away is one of our people in the prop and art department. The guy who's standing on the stairs in the Zocalo gets pulled down. Another person from the art department. I'm not sure if I use their names or not. We're always putting our members of our crew into the show whenever we had a body we needed to fill. What I love about Sheridan's dilemma here, he never sought out to turn against the government. Throughout this entire story, right up until the next episode, some part of him believed he could work this out, as the audience believes he could work this out, because traditionally that's what happens. There's this terrible thing that's going to happen, and in the season finale or shortly before that, they work it out and everything's fine, and the show goes back to where it was again. We recalibrate, we reboot from the ground up. Everyone here is doing everything they possibly can to buy time, to let the process go through, let General Haig do his thing, and in the hopes that they won't have to take that stand. They would do anything to avoid taking that stand. But there's a quote I sometimes fall back on, that people try to find lives in which courage will not be necessary. The only problem with this is that it's impossible. And as Sheridan discovers, walking that line after a certain point becomes impossible. I think this is the first time that Jakar appears I love the look the one the other officer gives her. The look that the first time Jakar was in this episode, and he liked being up there. He had a really strange kind of almost playful attitude about the whole thing. And speaking of putting the character in a literal vice, there's Zach coming in, and there's Sheridan behind him, and Jakar and the others in front of him, squeezing him. Everything about this is meant to squeeze all of our characters as tightly as possible. And in a way, Lando's being squeezed by his own past, by his own choices. And we're back again to the scenes of Lando in the future as Emperor. I love the fact that we showed so many times that he was going to become Emperor, and the scene with Lando and Jakar strangling each other. I love being able to show you what's going to happen, but not give you the context of things, so that when you see it, it's not what you thought it was. Similarly, when we had the scene with all those 4 characters a moment ago, now Zach going in, we think, having just seen him talk to them, that they asked him to help and he's not ratting them out. And for a lot of viewers, it's like, what the hell? Zach has gone to the wrong side. Although, I guess if you know television well enough, part of you goes, no, that's not going to happen. It just looks that way. Ems is a lot of Narns. But I love how the scene is lit. I love the textures of all the wardrobe. I love Andreas's delivery as a spokesman, as a leader, came from a gravitas that he carries inside of him. Andreas studied under Peter Brook in Europe, one of the foremost acting workshops or schools in Europe. And it was all about giving you weight to your performance, but also a lightness of being at the same time, which is a really, really hard thing to pull off. But Andreas could flip between them masterfully. And anytime anyone ever came through, they were with the Peter Brook, acting ensemble, acting troupe. I just said hire them, because if you can survive that, you can survive anything. As in the prior episode, whenever we want to add weight to a scene, we tend to go to voiceover narration. We slow the motion down a little bit. And we show, Sheridan not having slept. Going back to the gravitas, going back to the weight of things. He's been sitting up all night long. The only comfort he's given himself is by opening up his jacket a little bit. We have the tombstone Wyatt Earp moment as they're walking through the hall. It's verging on cliche and maybe possibly sliding a little bit over into cliche, but it works. I remember when we shot that scene with them walking through the hall together. They had to kind of work hard to keep from laughing, because it just felt so like, yeah, we're gunfighters. We're going to go find Ike Clanton and deal with him. The door is CG because we didn't have the actual door that would have to close in that fashion, not where they were. And full props to Jeff Conaway for pulling off this whole arc. I mean, this arc was built to let him really show what he can do as an actor. And it comes through. He really sold the slow sense of betrayal, the sense of being in over his head and being the moral voice in the group. What Sheridan does over the course of the show, particularly once the Interstellar Alliance kicks in, was to show how you can unify different species and different worlds into one group. And the other way this is the point of no return is for the first time we see that. When we have Narns showing up to work security on Babylon 5, as Shakar himself said, that's the first step toward looking towards the humans as they will eventually save us all, but we have to work together. So when they show up as now part of security, it's the keeping of that promise, that potential, and at the same time, it's the foreshadowing of, okay, the Narns are going to join up, the Brakiri are going to join up, the Game are going to join up. Eventually, this is going to be a true interstellar alliance. And all of that starts right here. This is where we cross the Rubicon, point of no return. And we also see here Sheridan speaking about now immoral or illegal orders. And this becomes a theme for the next episode as well, when he's talking to the ship saying, you have to know these are illegal orders. Don't obey them. And he genuinely thinks that's going to work. He genuinely believes that they're going to be able to come out of this in one piece. As does the audience. It's called fish hooking, the audience, where they, like that, where you get them to fall for the tropes that, oh yeah, this will all work out fine in the end, and then it doesn't. As we have here, as he says out loud, he has temporary solution, but he's saying, he's hoping that'll straighten things out back home, or that or the Hague will pull a coup, as we have right now, and we're hoping the Russians going to be dealt with a coup. This is all about stalling actions, which again is kind of the definition of the second act of a story, is you're stalling for the big event that's going to come in a moment. Love this. Love when the Narns show up. It's just wonderful. I like Marshall's look here. There's a thing about acting when oftentimes actors are concerned that they don't have a line in a scene and what they're supposed to do. And I think it was Michael Caine who was saying that he had a scene where he had no dialogue, and the director sort of stopped the rehearsal and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Well, I don't have any lines here." He said, "Well, of course you do. You have the most witty, incisive, insightful, sarcastic, magnificent lines in the history of mankind in your head as you're sitting there. You're just choosing not to say them." And in Marshall's face, in Talon's face, you could see that he's not just standing there. Look at his face. He is holding back what he might be saying. It's a great technique. I love the nature of prophecy because we don't understand really what it means at this time. And the thing about the eye that must be saved, it has a lot of different meanings. It goes back to the Centauri eye. It will refer to Jakar's being blinded in one eye and having to save his life. And there's also a thing about the eye that does not see. His very next line is, "I don't understand." So is it also a reference to himself, that he doesn't understand? This is one of my favorite scenes. I love Stephen's reaction. And it sets up the paranoia between the two of them. I briefly considered playing that paranoia across several episodes because there's a lot that I could have milked in this. Let's just kind of wrap it up at the end of this episode. We might allude to it here and there, but I need these two to be, allied together, rather than looking at each other saying, which of us is going to get killed first? to be the emperor. I like that she spoke in, again, we explained why earlier, but why she speaks in the plural form. Mark Twain once said of the royal we are not pleased, that kind of thing. That the only people who are entitled to use the royal we are kings, editors, and people with tapeworms. I think it's a fine philosophy. Again, going back to all the things you could be saying, you see them in Marshall's face when he's beside her. Just the look that he gives her and her frustration. Sometimes the best scenes are just played without dialogue. Just trust the actor's reactions. I mean, look at Jakar here and fire up Midnight on the Firing Line or the pilot and compare and contrast. The growth of Jakar is just, and the way Andres could play him was just so significant. And now comes everything due. He was saying he wants in, and it's not they trust him, but they also know that if there are things that they tell him that he finds out, it's not going to go easy for them because they withheld a lot of information that could have helped his people, but they kind of had to sacrifice them. Which goes back to what he said a moment ago: some must be sacrificed for the rest to live. When I first wrote this scene, when we first filmed this scene, I don't think they entirely got the context as much as I wanted them to. They were kind of just sitting side by side on the couch, and it was more, wasn't your ship leaving? They were more sincere about it. I saw how this is being done. I said, no, they need to sit far apart, and each of them is lying to the other to a certain degree. And each of them is sure that at some point the knife is going to come out. So it's hysterical to watch, but I really think, the laugh, I love the laugh, that they could not have sustained it in the long run as a storyline. Of course, I made some dinner going back to this story, like to poison each other all the time. So it's like, he's not hungry. Again, over and over in this show, you see the tendency to just put two actors in a room, in a small space, elevator, sitting on a couch, and you just trust to the performance. You just trust to the dialogue between the two characters. So if you're watching this at home for the first time when this first aired, the fact that folks didn't know what was coming, we might think by this time, okay, they've now solved the problem here, and Haig will solve the problem over there. This will all work out until you get the gut punch of, no, Haig is coming here, which he doesn't actually make it there, and it'll be discovered. And this is not going to work out. This is the first indication for the audience that, oh my, maybe this is not going to happen. We didn't use this shot very often where they're doing a long pull-out from the window because it was a pain in the ass to pull off. And I'm still not quite sure that I like the geometry of that shot. Something about it looks wrong to me. So that is Point of No Return. And I have a small treat for you. I'm almost abashed to put this on here. I'll do it anyway. So, people sometimes ask, have I ever done any acting as well as writing and producing? The answer is hell no. Small, tiny things, a cameo, trying to pick up a hammer or turning off the lights, that's fine. But not any actual acting because I am terrible. One of the very few times I ever actually did it, I was 24 or 25. I was a film and theater critic for KSDO Radio in San Diego. I was also writing articles for the LA Times, and I was kind of a medium-sized fish in a small pond. And there was a show in San Diego. Well, technically it was shot in Tijuana. I've just forgotten the call letters of the station. And the show was called Disaster Piece Theater. It was kind of built along the lines of Elvira or MST3K, where they would show dreadful movies and then break it up with comedy sketches. And they called one day and said, listen, why don't you come down? We're big fans of your reviews and your articles. Why don't you write a couple of sketches for us and come down and perform them with us? And I'm not sure what possessed me to say yes. I believe it was probably delusions of adequacy, but I went and was wretched beyond all belief. I'm attaching this here just to kind of give you a sense of what I looked like and what I was back at that age, since it's never been seen anywhere since we did this broadcast. It's all the tapes were destroyed. I got like one of the last ones they had, transferred it to VHS and then onto a disc. As you watch it, you'll notice a few things about the way that I look. In particular, you'll notice that I'm wearing a dress shirt, a vest, and a jacket. The reason for that, even though it was warm in the studio, is that I weighed 140, maybe 145 pounds at the time, and I'm 6'3", 6'4". And if I didn't bulk up with clothing, I looked like a horror, quite frankly. And as you watch the piece, you will see that my arm only fits about half of the sleeve of the jacket. So that was all just part of the process of kind of hiding how gaunt I had become from not eating, because I was still not making much money from the writing. But anyway, so it's a funny little piece. I won't show you the whole thing because I wouldn't want to hurt you that badly. But I will show you a part of it and lead up to it, and I may or may not put the end of it on there because it's not that much to see, as a treat for the patrons and to embarrass myself publicly as much as humanly possible. So with that said, we conclude our commentary on Point of No Return. Enjoy the terrible, terrible, terrible piece of me that's about to follow, and we will reconvene here again soon. So stay out of trouble, and we'll see you down the road.
Have you seen any good movies lately? Well, you're not gonna see one tonight. I hope you're in the mood for something really lousy, 'cause if you are, just hold on tight. Well, our boy Sally Lloyd.
Hi, I'm Sally Lloyd here. Disaster Piece Theater, worst program on television. And I'm looking over some of the notes about the film that we're going to show tonight called The Leech Woman. You know, I don't get any classics to show. I get these bombs to show. The Leech Woman. Hi, we're back here from the wonderful film that we're seeing tonight, The Leech Woman, and we're on a little program we're calling Leaked Previews. Now, I have a few guests on this program. One is J. Michael Straczynski, who is the film critic for KSDO Radio and also a professional writer. And it's nice to have you here, J. Michael. And also our, shall we say, our staff, and believe me, he does have the staff, critic Rex Oedipus.
It's so old.
Mm-hmm. And another.
It's terrible to be here.
It's great. It's
Get
great.
on with it, would you?
Okay, and our film critic on the female side, Rona Reuter. And Rona, it's awfully nice to have you here.
Hi, Tom.
J. Michael, I understand that we have some films that are going to be coming up in the future that you're going to be showing to us.
We have some rare films, films that have never been previewed anywhere else in the country. We have stills from them that describe the film, and we'll talk about them. And these are films that are coming out in 1981. For the first time anywhere, they're being seen here tonight.
Right here?
Right here for the first
Disaster
time.
Piece Theater?
That's right. That's right.
Well, let's get on with it
I agree.
then. Let's take
That's
a
what we've
look at
got
some
here.
of these beautiful pictures that we're going to be looking at.
No.